Good morning, world. Today we're talking about suicide. It's not exactly one of my favorite items, but it's something that's out there and therefore something we should address. We're going to go through and debunk some of the myths about suicide. And then I'll finish up by giving you some tools and tips that you can use if you suspect someone is suicidal. The first one is that people who commit suicide want to die. No, they don't. People commit suicide as a final last resort. Something's going on. It is so bad that I feel like I cannot find another way out of it, and dying is the only way I can make the pain stop. People who commit suicide are in a great deal of pain. They're hurting, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. There's a lot going on with them, and they do not have, or they feel that they do not have the resources to deal with whatever is going on with them. And they find suicide or dying to be their only way out. But it's not that they don't want to die. Given the option, given the opportunity to resolve the issues that are going on, to have better resources to deal with the stresses that they are dealing with, most people, I don't know, I've never talked to someone who actually succeeded, but most people who have attempted or who have considered it, given other options, would probably choose life over dying. Another one is that people who commit suicide, or people who talk about suicide, don't commit suicide. That is not exactly true. Verbalizing suicidal thoughts or suicidal intents can be a cry for help. A lot of times when the person says, I want to kill myself, or I think I'd be better off dead, or any way that a person could verbalize a suicidal thought or intent, that's the person saying, I'm really hurting, I don't feel like I can handle this, please help me. Yes, it is a cry for help, but it's not necessarily that if they don't get the help, they're not going to do it. If they don't get the help that they're asking for, it is a great possibility that this person who says, I'm going to kill myself, will actually kill themselves if they don't get the help. So verbal thoughts or verbal suicidal threats often are a cry for help. But it's not to say that just because someone said it, just because it's been verbalized, that the person really has no intention of going to. It's more like me saying, okay, this is what I'm thinking about, please help me, I really cannot do this by myself, I need your help, someone please help, hear me. And if nobody hears you, then sometimes it does happen where the person does follow through and commits, or at least attempts, a suicide act. And sometimes people mistake that if a person attempted but did not complete a suicidal act, that this means that they really weren't serious about it. It's not that they weren't serious about it, it's just that the method that they attempted did not really do the job that they were trying to get done. But a suicidal attempt that is thwarted, or that is found, or that someone is lucky enough to stop, does not mean that the person wasn't serious. It just means that their method didn't do the job. But it should be taken seriously, and it is telling you that someone needs help. The person is crying out, and please help. Suicide is more common in men than in women than men. That's the thought. But it's two parts. Completion of suicide is more common in men than in women. Attempts of suicides, meaning that someone tries but does not succeed, or does not complete the act of killing themselves, that is more common in women. The reason for that is that women try the softer methods, things like taking pills, cutting, things that take a little bit longer to go through, and therefore may give a longer period or greater opportunity for someone to find them and get them help and prevent them from actually dying. Men they go for the hardcore stuff. Men use like knives and major cuts, guns and things like that, things where the moment they do what they do, death is right there, right behind them. So that's why it's more common that men complete suicides, but women actually attempt suicides more than men. Can suicide be inherited, or is it contagious? Well, the answer to that is sort of, kind of, not really, but maybe a little bit. Want me to explain? Okay. People who know people who have committed suicide are a little bit more likely, and that is because that someone that this person knows has normalized the behavior. It's not that if you commit suicide and I touch you, and it's not like cooties, but what happens is once it's been normalized, if someone's thinking about it, and if it's in the back of my head, but I am not willing to go through with it because of whatever religious or social or cultural issues I may have with it, I'm thinking, okay, I shouldn't do it, but I'm thinking about it. But once people in my life have done it, they've kind of normalized it a little bit, sort of made it okay. That's why when we do suicide assessments, we always ask people, do you know anyone who has committed suicide? For example, if a child has a parent who has committed suicide, that child is probably sees it more normally than a child whose parents have always said, no, suicide is not an acceptable out. So knowing someone does make it a little bit more normal, more acceptable of a behavior or a method of coping, but it's not contagious. It's not inherited. It's just, it normalizes it for you. So that's why if things like reporting suicides is something I'm highly against, for the simple fact that the more we report it, the more normal it seems, and the more normal it seems, the more likely people who have thought about it, who are thinking about it, are to take action on it. So although reporting sometimes, yeah, maybe it does help with statistics, but really reporting it on the news, reporting it like all over the place like they do these days, I'm highly against that, because I don't want it to become something. I don't want it to become the norm. I don't want people to have that as a normal method of coping. So it's not contagious, but knowing someone does normalize it. Will people who have attempted suicide try it again? Yes. Once the person has attempted suicide, they've shown you that, or they've pretty much expressed that they saw this as a method of coping. What does happen is that if someone attempts and does get help, they get new resources. They learn how to cope outside of that suicide option. So they have more resources to deal with the stresses that they encounter in everyday life. So suicide may be way down, or maybe not even currently on their list of options, now that they've gotten help and that they know a few more things. But it's still a possibility somewhere out there. And usually the first few weeks, the first few days are highest, and then the first few weeks, and as time goes by, then it lowers. But the first few days after a suicide attempt are the riskiest, because at that point the person still has all the same issues that made them consider suicide as an option, but on top of that they have the added pressure of, oh my goodness, everybody knows that I tried to kill myself. Oh my goodness, this is yet another thing I wasn't able to do. So there are added pressures that a failed suicide attempt brings, which makes the days after a suicide attempt very touchy. They're very difficult. That's why a lot of times when someone has committed suicide and you take them to the hospital, they stay on suicide watch for a while. And that's to keep an eye on them, because we know that the days right after are a little touchy. And when they go home, we should still be keeping an eye and making sure that we are supporting them. Suicide is for the weak? No. Suicide is something that people try when they feel that they have nothing else. But I think it was Bill Clinton that said, it takes some serious brass. It doesn't say that the person is weak. It says that the person felt that they had no other options. But it really takes some serious courage, like, to be able to make that decision and go through with it. It's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign that someone needed help. It's a sign that someone could not find the resources that they needed to deal with whatever was going on with them. But it's not something about being weak. People who are depressed will kill themselves. No. While many people who attempt or succeed, or let me say, who attempt or complete suicides have depression or suffered from depression, not everyone who suffers from depression commits suicide. I mean, think about it. About 10% of the population goes through a level of suicide every year. Imagine if 10% of the population kill themselves every year. No. Depression does not mean you're going to attempt suicide. It does not make you suicide. It does not mean that you are suicidal. Depression is a disease that exists, that we can get help with, that we have medication, and we have other non-medication related treatments to help someone deal with depression. But a lot of people who do commit suicide have a severe form of depression. And the most common part of it is that the person was depressed. A lot of times they were not getting the help that they needed to deal with whatever the issues were that were affecting them at the time. Suicide is something that certain races do? No, it's not. It's absolutely everybody can, everyone and anyone in any race can commit suicide. I know in my work I've found a lot of times in the black community, and that's not so much in the black, but the older black community, like a couple generations back, believe that this is something, it's not a black thing. It actually is. Black people commit suicide just like everybody else, or they attempt suicide just like everybody else. It is something that's out there, and you cannot exclude, you cannot turn your back or pretend it doesn't exist. It exists in all communities. It exists in the black community, it exists in the Hispanic community, and it exists in the white community, the Native Americans, even Asians. I don't know which communities I missed, but whatever community that you're in that you think that my people don't commit suicide, if you think that, you're lying to yourself. And you need to keep your eyes open, because in the communities where we think it doesn't happen, what ends up happening is that we are less likely to help, because I'm thinking that, hey, black people don't commit suicide. We turn it over to Jesus. Well, you know what? Jesus invented therapists. Jesus invented services to help people. So if you, for any reason, feel that your community is immune, you're lying to yourself, and you're actually increasing the risk in your community because you're failing to provide the services that your people need. So suicide is for teens? No. Earlier this year, the CDC released the report stating that, or showing that suicide was becoming more prevalent among the adults in the middle ages, from, I believe it was 35 to 60, I want to say 65, but 60 something. And showing that the suicide rates have gone up. Before, we used to think, okay, it's a teen thing, but it's not a teen thing. Adults, especially in the most recent years, where adults in the middle ages, with the way the economy has been and stress levels being so much higher, people find themselves at greater risk of elevated stress. And of course, when the economy is bad, the first thing we do is cut services. So we have higher risk and fewer services. So it's not a good equation. So I can see how that would translate into higher rates of suicide, which is what we have seen in the last few years. CDC put something out in May of this year, 2013, May 2013, showing the more recent numbers. Finally, people who are doing good or people who are financially well off don't commit suicide, right? They're rich. What do they have, right? No. Suicide has no socioeconomic nothing. There are no people, actually people from all walks of life can attempt and can experience stress, and therefore people from all walks of life are susceptible to suicide. In fact, one of the added pressures that these people have is the pressure to not have issues because they, according to the rest of the world, have everything. But that does not mean that what you see or what the outside person sees as having everything could mean absolutely nothing to that person who cannot have the one thing that they need. We don't know what goes on with other people. We don't know what they're going through. So just because you're providing your child with everything, you're providing your family with what you think is everything, does not make them immune to suicide. It just means that they have resources available, and we should all be making sure that when resources are available, you're using them to help the people who need them. Okay, so we've gone through about 10 myths. And I know this video is getting way too long, but before we go, let me give you just a couple little things, a couple little tips. I can't leave you without sharing some things on what can you do. The first thing we can do is keep our eyes open. Keep your eyes and ears open, because usually suicide is not sudden. Suicide is something that is thought of, contemplated, and planned. Someone doesn't just wake up one day and say, hey, today's a good day to die, and boom. No. Suicide is something that is thought of, planned, and had been there. It's been led to or led up to over a period. So keep your eyes and ears open. And if things don't look right, second thing you can do is don't be afraid to speak up. And take every sign seriously. Take every threat or any cues that you get. Don't dismiss them. Take them seriously. Don't be afraid to speak up. If you suspect that someone is suicidal, don't be afraid to ask them if they are. Don't be afraid to ask them if they're thinking of killing themselves. Some people have this fear that if I ask, I will put the idea in the person's head if they weren't thinking about it. That's not true. If the person is thinking about it, then they're thinking about it. If they're not thinking about it, just you bringing it up will not make it something that they're necessarily planning on doing or wanting to do. So don't be afraid to ask the question, and ask honestly, ask frankly, and ask directly. Don't beat around the bush. Don't try to circumvent the situation. Be direct. Be direct and be honest about it. You're concerned, so express your concern. It's better to have someone be mad at you because you were concerned than to have to live with the guilt of not having, acted on your concern. So if you think there's something going on, ask about it. Don't be afraid to speak up. Enlist help. Sometimes the situation is more than you can handle. Sometimes maybe the relationship you have with the person doesn't allow you or to be comfortable enough to be the one to ask. So if you need to enlist the help of others, do that. Counselors, family members, church members, people in your community, anyone who can help. Not so much of blabbing about it to the world and making it a rumor thing, but genuinely seeking assistance. If you go and talk to someone's mom because you think that person is suicidal, that's different than you posting it on your Facebook page, than you just going around and telling everybody at school that you think so-and-so is suicidal. No. But if you think a person is suicidal and you go and talk to their counselor, or maybe you think you go and ask their best friend or express that concern to their best friend, that's different. But versus you just talking about it because it's a new topic of conversation. Don't make promises. A lot of times when we want information, people have a tendency to make promises. Okay, tell me, I won't tell anybody. No, that is not an option. That is not acceptable. You can't make those promises, because when the situation gets beyond what you can handle, you either have to break your promise or not help. So instead of putting yourself in that bind, be firm, be direct, and make no promises. If you need to get help, you will get help. If you need to enlist, if I need to call your mama, I'm gonna call your mama. But if you make a promise to not do it, you can't do that. So don't make any promises to get the information that you need. And finally, make sure the person feels supported. A person gets to that level of thinking or planning or even attempting suicide when they are so far gone, when things are so bad that they feel there's no other way, when they feel that they have to carry the burden by themselves, and that when they feel that they have no other option. One of the things that you can do is to be supportive. Remind them that there are options. Remind them that, hey, see, you have help. I'm here. I support you. I'm going to help you. Just kind of being there and helping that person feel supported goes a long way. It reminds them that they're not alone in this fight. It reminds them that there are other options. You may not be able to convince the person, hey, no, don't kill yourself, which is actually something that you should not do. You should not try to, you can't try to lecture the person out of suicide. You can't really try to make a person feel bad about it. But if you are supportive, if you are there for them and they feel supported and they feel cared for and they feel that you are able and willing to help, that gives them the other option. That shows them another option. You may not be able to paint the picture for them, but your actions, your support, your caring, the things that you do to be there for them shows them the other options that they may not have thought were there for them before. Alright, so that's it for today after a very, very long video. I apologize this was so long, but these were things that I thought needed to say. I will try to be less long-winded in the next ones. I will be posting another video showing or addressing things that you can do, things that ways to help, and also signs that you should be on the lookout for. So be on the lookout for that video. Alright, that's it for today. Good morning, world. Have a great day.